Now, 58 degrees in Des Moines. I'm Suzanne Lee. Get information on demand anytime at whoradio.com. From News Radio 1040 WHO.
From the Hy-Vee Studios, News Radio 1040 WHO.
Views expressed are those of hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
We're going to have a very interesting morning. We're going to have experts from all kinds of different fields. Later this morning, a little bit after 10, we're going to talk with Dr. Merrill Matthews. He is an Iowan back home visiting, and he is an expert on Obamacare. He is an expert on some of the phases of energy development. He's going to talk to us about several different issues, especially since he is visiting home. We're going to put him to work this morning. He's going to tell you that the cheapest Obamacare health plan is going to cost about $20,000 per family. And he says they have grossly underestimated the true cost of this thing, and he's going to talk to us about that later. We're also going to talk with former Senator Lincoln, Blanche Lincoln. She used to be the senator from Arkansas. Now she's talking about independent businesses and contractors, and she's on the warpath to protect independent contractors from Obama. So that's going to be a kind of a busy morning, too. We may have some open line time, but the first hour, though, this is sort of a follow-up of a program we had earlier, a couple of weeks ago, and we got involved in evaluating a video dealing with the issue of geoengineering. What's geoengineering? The concern is that you have some folks out there trying to modify our weather and our climate, putting stuff into our atmosphere to change weather patterns, theoretically to keep the effects of, quote, global warming from happening. And the people who just want to change the way the Mother Nature gives us resources from the sky, mainly rain, and like to change that kind of stuff. And I was digging around in the video, and this is probably the central core right here.
Wherever you see the jet chemtrails go over, you're going to get aluminum, barium, strontium coming down on you.
Why would we not believe it's happening when what we see in the sky matches exactly the expressed goal of numerous geoengineering patents, about 160 or more? Why would we not believe this is happening when every element showing up in the rain tests are the primary elements named in those geoengineering patents? Why would we not believe this is happening when we have escalating levels in very short time frames, as short as 5 years? We see rain levels of aluminum, for example, escalating as much as 50,000%. California air quality studies do not show these metals migrating from China, and it's of recent origin. So, this bombardment of heavy metals that's raining down on us is coming from somewhere. Why would we not believe geoengineering is occurring when the weather patterns are so altered here in exactly the manner stated by geoengineers and reports on the consequences for geoengineering, which are diminished rainfall, which are increased ozone destruction? We have a massive ozone hole in the northern hemisphere now.
Should aluminum be in the soil in the rain? And yes, it should be in the soil. It's naturally there, always was there. And should it be in the rain? Well, absolutely not.
Well, that is the central core, I think. Dan Wigington is one of the producers of the documentary that I was just playing some sound from. Former Bechtel Power Corporation employee, contractor now in California and in Arizona. He was recently featured, his residence was recently featured in the cover edition of one of these renewable energy magazines called Home Power. Has a 1,600-acre wildlife preserve in Northern California where he lives. He's a lead researcher for geoengineeringwatch.org. Well, that was your voice, Dane, and state any more of the central premise of your concern.
Thanks for shining light on this subject again, Jan. And the concern is that nobody has the right to play God with the weather. Any such notion should be seen as the insanity it is. And again, we have a mountain of documents to show that these programs have existed since at least the late 40s, and these documents are from the government, such as NASA and other governmental agencies. So, we have quite a paper trail to verify the long history of these programs that have now grown into such a global effect on the weather that it's really disrupting all the climate natural systems.
I was watching your documentary a few minutes ago, and you looked at China, and you said the Chinese have been doing this and have been trying to change their weather patterns. They were doing so with such vigor that you assert in your video that they caused about $1 billion to their own economy. They either overdid it or screwed up.
Actually, not my assertion, Jen. If people look this up, they can look up Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorms, and this was covered on mainstream media. They were not secretive about this, and their openness with their Bureau of Weather Modification. But when they did $1 billion worth of damage to Beijing, which they openly admitted, and people can look this up online. Don't want anybody to believe what I say. They can see the stats and data around these weather modification events.
So did they quit?
No, it appears they haven't quit. They just simply quit publicizing. I mean, we see the same sorts of events happening, but they were very open about it up until that time. I mean, they were not trying to be covert, but that's why there is some stories on mainstream media about that. But people will find numerous articles from mainstream sources about their weather modification activities. Chinese scientists create artificial snowstorms, I know, is one of the main stories.
You imply that in the video there that the pollution or the aluminum stuff that we find in the rain is not caused by the Chinese. We're doing it to ourselves?
Well, the videos were done by Michael Murphy. I don't want to take any credit for that. I'm just one interview in those. Our site is probably a global hub on this issue. But we have studies. For example, CARB, California Air Resources Board, has extensively studied the aerosols coming from China. And heavy metals are not amongst those aerosols, with the exception of mercury, which converts to a gaseous state. So heavy metals like aluminum and barium don't just float across oceans. Again, and these metals were not here before. We have very extensive USDA soil studies on the soil pHs throughout Northern California. I mean, I have huge manuals here from the USDA, and our soil pHs here, which were previously acidic in the 5.4, 5.5 range,
right,
are now up to 6.6, 6.8. This has happened in the last 10 years, Jan, so something
right,
very profound is going on. And the metals are here, they're in the rain, now they're in the soil, and we see the pH changes accordingly.
One last question here before we introduce our in-studio skeptic here in just a second. Are we talking about weather modification, simply just trying to make some clouds rain in a specific spot? Or are we talking about climate changes in climate management? Is there a difference in your mind?
There is a difference. To alter the weather, there are many small and published weather modification programs throughout the continental U.S. About 150 per year are openly published from counties and states. But geoengineering is more of a global climate modification process. And again, we have documents, one from NASA, which I sent you, Jan, by the way, this morning, so your readers can review that. We found it on the NASA archives, 80 pages long, from 1966, that openly states, as of 1966, the U.S. government had been involved in weather modification for a full 20 years prior, back to 1946. And this document also states that they had budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars, even in 1966. So I did send this to you for your readers to review, if you can post it on your site. I mean, this is a U.S. government document. So this is climate modification, which affects all the Earth's systems. And anybody that knows about the weather would understand, or any understanding of the weather, if you affect any part of the system, you affect the whole system. And indeed, we see weather that's completely off the rails. Most people have noticed it by now. And this is something that quite simply should not be hampered with, and they're doing it on a incredibly massive scale. This
is Dan Wigington. He is a researcher, and he is one of the contributors to Geoengineeringwatch.org. What we'll do is we'll take a brief time out, and then I'll introduce you to Craig Bergman, who is into religion, politics, and culture. He's sort of an expert in all those things. He's helping produce an upcoming documentary called Agenda 21. We've talked with him before. Brief time out, back in a moment at 1040 WHO.
When was the last time you sat across from someone who was passionate about your success, who could approve your personal or business loan quickly and efficiently? Two Rivers Bank and Trust offers local decision-making in communities across Iowa. They take the time to understand the people behind the numbers, providing a better solution for you, the customer. And Two Rivers Financial Group provides insurance and other products for your business or family. So it's one-stop shopping with a true personal touch. To learn more, go to tworiversbank.com now. Member FDIC and Equal Housing Lender.
Thank you for attending this morning's networking event. And don't forget to
Liz, congrats on the C-Suite promotion.
Thanks, Bob. Top of my to-do list is getting the budget approved for our next capital project.
Are you worried about how that's going to hit your bottom line?
I was. Then I met with my account manager from Alliant Energy, and they told me about their custom rebate program.
Like when you buy a washing machine and mail in a rebate?
No. We're working with Alliant Energy to find energy savings on the project. And when it's completed, we get a big check. Literally, it's bigger than the golf score you turned in at the chamber outing last year.
Hey, that's the last time I fill in on your foursome.
Anyway, if you guys are thinking about installing any new equipment, you should give Alliant Energy a call.
Is new equipment or a process expansion project in your business's future? Find out more about how Alliant Energy can impact your bottom line by calling 1-866-ALLIANT.
Alliant Energy, we're on for you.
This is John Greenhut, the CEO of Power Swabs, and I know that a New Year's resolution to lose weight is a tough one to keep. So let me give you the simplest way to look younger. Whiten your teeth in 5 minutes with Power Swabs. A recent study showed that people looked on average 13 years younger with whiter teeth. Power Swabs gives you 2 shades whiter teeth in 5 minutes. Plus, it works on natural teeth as well as crowns and veneers. And it's easy. There's no messy strips or trays. Just swab your teeth for 5 minutes and you're done. In 5 minutes, you'll see 2 shades whiter teeth, and in 7 days, 6 shades. See coffee, tea, and smoking stains disappear. Call for your risk-free supply. 1-800-361-5091. That's 1-800-361-5091. I guarantee your friends, family, and coworkers will notice your white smile. So call now. 1-800-361-5091. That's 1-800-361-5091.
50,000 watts of power. News Radio 1040 WHO.
Dane Wigington is a fellow who monitors geoengineering. He thinks this is a serious deal, and we're paying a huge price for people yet unknown and faceless. We're trying to figure out exactly who. Tampering with the weather and, in essence, polluting our hemisphere in the process. Craig Bergman is here in the studio. As I introduced him previously, as an expert in religion, politics, and culture. Just ask him. And Agenda 21 is the think piece you guys are working on. You've been listening, and you've heard Dane Wigington. What do you think about this?
Well, Jan, I thank you first for having me on your show. You know, when I was listening the other week, I just called in to pretty much say, you know, come on, Jan, what are you doing? You're a credible Marconi-winning talk show host. You talk about all the issues in our culture that are right on the money. You have what's needed to advance the conservative cause, and now you're having this on there. And I just thought, somebody's got to come on there and say,
rescue me?
Yeah, really.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
this is an
save
intervention?
the movement. Yeah, this is an intervention.
All right. So what's your problem, though, with what Dane was saying?
Well, I want to cover a couple things first. First, geoengineering is a real theory. So what we have here, I better set the premise. There is a thing called rat poison. And rat poison is not poison. It's 99% good food with just a little bit of poison in it that will kill you. And that's what these kind of whack job theories are. And I'm just going to call them what they are. And this is one of them. This is not legitimate. There is no science behind it. It is a conjecture, and it's a far-fetched one when we walk through what I'll do later, simple math. But I want to start with, yes, geoengineering is a real theory. There are really people who believe this can be scientifically possible. They have spent millions of dollars on it, almost all of them on the environmental wacko left of the world. Because here's what it is. To believe in this theory, to believe that geoengineering is even possible, you have to accept the very foundation, the very premise, the very cornerstone of the leftist wacko environmental movement, that man, through his own efforts, is capable of radically altering our climate and our environment. If you believe that, then you better believe in global warming. You better send your money to Al Gore and send your money to this guy, because they're going to, be working together. If you reject that premise, if you think I'm skeptical of that premise, if you're not sure, then you're a rational, sane, objective conservative, and we can have a dialogue. But if you already believe that man can do that, if you believe, rolling down your window and running your air conditioner a little extra long, spraying some hairspray, using underarm deodorant, these kind of things are going to change the world, there's no hope. You're done. You might as well not even bother to call in. And so I would like to say that the most important thing, and you asked the question, Jan, you said, is geoengineering, climate control, and weather modification the same thing? He said, oh no, they're different. And I totally agree, they are completely different. And then he went on to use a dozen examples of weather modification that proves geoengineering. Okay, they are completely different. Think of the issue of immigration and think of the issue of border control. They are closely related, but they are not the same issue. We have problems with immigration that don't relate to border control at all. And we have border control issues that aren't immigration. The people sneaking across our border are not immigrants, they're criminals. And we have to use the right language on every debate that we get into, or we're not going to get anywhere. So I have 3 generic premises. I'll hit them real quick, and then we can take them apart. The first one is, no one is actually doing geoengineering. It is a theory. And it's a theory like people study quantum mechanics and time travel and cold fusion. Universities spend millions and millions of dollars studying all kinds of things that go nowhere. And this has gone nowhere. The second thing is, weather control has been around since the 1900s, since man invented an airplane and was able to fly up and actually look at clouds for the first time and not just see them from the ground as a primitive primate. He said, well, these are full of water vapor. I bet if we put some silver or particles in it, we could make them a little bit heavier, and instead of blowing over the top of us, they would fall and rain on us. And they do that. Sure, they invented snow in China. We put snow up on the mountains in Aspen when it doesn't snow up there. But as you look around at the larger weather patterns, he was just talking about the dry, dry, dry. Well, last year we were dry, dry, dry. This year we're wet, wet, wet. And you know what? I've been in Iowa my whole life, 48 years, and I can remember flood, 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 drought, 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 farm crisis, not farm crisis. It's called weather. We have the joke in Iowa where we say, if you don't like the weather in Iowa, what?
Wait 20 minutes.
It'll change.
Yeah.
So, that's why they've went to this thing called climate change, because they really are trying to blur the distinction between weather and climate, because they are pushing an agenda.
All right.
And so those are my points.
All right. Dane, you've been listening patiently. Go ahead.
First of all, I hear a lot of opinion, but I don't hear a lot of fact. When he refers to the wacko left being the only people who think you could modify the weather, let's add a few more to that category. How about DOD, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, NASA, RAND Corporation, MIT, University of Arizona, University of Wisconsin, University of California, Science Administration, Colorado State University. I could go on and on and on. I don't want anybody to believe me. Again, the document I mailed you this morning, Jan, the full outline of the U.S. weather modification programs as of 1966, 80 pages long. I challenge people to look and examine this. And in one breath, I hear that we cannot modify the weather. In another breath, I hear that we are, in fact, modifying the weather. So it seems a contradiction to me there. And, again, we're not talking about theory. We're talking about fact, that these documents exist, these programs exist. We have film of these KC-10s, KC-135s spraying at altitude. So I don't want anybody to believe me again. I challenge people to actually look at the data, look at the video, examine these documents, examine the corporations involved. So apparently if you're right, and all these agencies, governmental agencies, huge universities, apparently all of them are confused that they can't affect the weather. And when you say the weather is perfectly normal and that it's raining where you're at, well, if somebody looks at the U.S. Drought Monitor, and people can look this up online, maybe it's nice and wet where you're at, Craig, but here we are in absolute all-time record drought, and that's exactly what we would expect when people meddle with the weather. You have deluge one place, drought in another. It throws the whole system out of balance. And now maybe you can explain to us, if you're familiar with geoengineering, Craig, and it seems like you think you are, can you tell us what SRM is? Can you answer that question? Do you know what SRM is?
Well, I'm not going to play the
well, no, you seem to be very familiar with all the science. Do you know what SAG is? SAI. These are very basic geoengineering terms. Solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering. These terms are named by every major science organization on the planet. Every major government on the planet is all discussing these terms. So, again, you have a lot of opinion, Craig, but I don't see any fact to back it up. And you refer to the wacko left being behind all these projects, or you insinuate that I'm making money off this in some way. I've spent about $50K of my own money, never taken or accepted a penny of my own money. I quite simply, when I see stats like Alzheimer's and autism going off the charts, we have tests that show clearly we are being buried under a mountain of toxic metal. That is beyond dispute. And we have tests from around the globe to back this up. We know it's not coming from China. We know it matches the geoengineering patents exactly. We know we have global dimming, another important term that people should look up.
Hang on, Dane, because that's goes to a chunk of sound I did capture this morning. I thought it was kind of interesting. I'd like a comment from both of you on this.
There are simply too many dots here that connect. Our skies are almost never blue anymore. That is a named consequence of geoengineering. The amount of lost sunshine hitting the planet right now is beyond belief. If people look up the term global dimming, they will see that fully 20% of the sun's rays that reached the planet several decades ago are no longer reaching the planet. I mean, that's a profound change that few people even know is occurring. And you have very visible occurrences in the sky from the aircraft, a very visible sun-blocking, expanding, dingy trails that are exactly what geoengineering patents describe.
Heavy aluminum, I'm talking like in the 40s and 50s up to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. That's still common.
That's interesting, Dane. Who was that fellow speaking?
That fellow is a U.S. Forest Service biologist, 35-year service to the U.S. Forest Service, degrees as long as your arm. And Francis has measured the aquatic insect life in Northern California, for example, which has declined 90% in the last 10 years because of this massive amount of aluminum flowing through our streams at this point. So, again, I just want to state that Craig asked everybody to believe what he thinks, and I'm only asking everybody to investigate the facts. And again, when you have agencies like Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, U.S. Forest Service, NASA, all these other universities I named, they're all involved with geoengineering programs and research. And this can be found, again, only one place of many, on the document I sent you, Jan. I hope you could post it.
Now, there's one question I asked you last time you were on with us, and one I'm still curious about, and I'd like some greater specificity if you have it. Who exactly are the managing agencies that are giving permission for specific flights to release specific amounts of whatever it is into the atmosphere? Where are the paper trails? Where are the specific accountabilities for these whomever they are and whoever flying the plane? And do we have a specific chain of evidence that we can point to with indisputable specificity?
Well, if you're asking for a government agency to admit that they're in, their part in each of these programs, we're not going to find that. Just like things with Agent Orange, depleted uranium, and a lot of other issues that we could go into.
Well, I'm just looking. People keep sending me videos and pictures of they say they've taken right here in Iowa of chemtrails and of particular flights, and I recorded this on this specific day, and this is over my house, and this is filling the. Well, wouldn't there be logs? Wouldn't there be people that you could ask? They say, who were those guys, and who told them to do that? I mean, this seems like this would be a difficult thing to keep under wraps for very long. Even for a good example of that is now the NSA had to admit that it's monitoring all the cell phone activity of Verizon. I mean, that was rumored 2 or 3 years ago. Now, finally, it's come out that it's actually the occasion, and it's real. We can prove it.
As far as keeping it under wraps, let's look at what happens to whistleblowers. In the case of those that blow the whistle on Wall Street, for example, the whistleblower usually ends up in jail, and all the criminals end up on their merry way. And I've personally spoken to NOAA scientists, USDA scientists, U.S. Forest Service scientists, all of whom know these programs are going on, but they're absolutely unwilling to speak out on the record for obvious reasons. You know, those who try are severely punished, and we see that with the Wall Street bit going on. And on the weather trading derivatives, and back to follow the money, and this is what people should understand, especially with farming, Jan, we have weather trading derivatives where they are making money. There is a full gaming casino on Wall Street that is ultimately backed by the weather makers to make money off of weather derivatives. This is hard science fact. So people can look this up and start to connect the money dots on this, that, you know, it's ultimately all about money and power. And again, we have other documents owning the weather.
Hang on, Dane. Dane Wigington is concerned about the chemtrails. My in-studio guest, Craig Bergman, thinks it's not worth our time even to ponder this. He thinks it's all a big scam. Right after our farm markets, we'll reconvene on 1040 WHO.
Harder, better, faster, stronger.
Talking here in the studio with Craig Berman. He is one of the people putting together Agenda 21. It's an upcoming documentary. On our newsmaker line, Dane Wigington, he is with Geoengineeringwatch.org, and we're again discussing chemtrails. And Craig, it's your turn.
Well, thank you, Jan. He was just throwing so many things out there. It's the classic throw everything against the wall and see what it sticks. And so I should have been taking notes on here. I didn't realize he was just going to go on this kind of monologue. I thought we'd have a lot more back and forth. But nevertheless, I'll take the few minutes we have here and try to
You're
run down.
You're welcome to go back and forth if you'd like.
Well, I tried, and he was talking over me, and I didn't want to be rude. So essentially what we have is, and I have to start with where he was. First of all,
I was completely quiet, Craig. I was completely quiet in the monologue. I just simply stated facts, and the agencies involved, hard facts with hard statements of which agencies are involved with this. That's not just a monologue, is it? You wanted facts, I gave you facts.
Go ahead.
Let's take a look at them. But first, I have to go back to your first premise. I said at the top of the thing, there is a difference between weather and climate. You continue to accuse me of blurring those two while you're the one actually blurring them. So let's just set that aside. Of course, people have been trying to influence the weather. That is not what geoengineering is. That is not what these chemtrails are about. That is not what you're peddling there. And you're diffusing it on purpose.
What do you base that on? How do you know that these are not geoengineering? How do you conclusively state that? What do you base that on?
You conclusively base that on the fact that everyone knows that they're doing weather modification, that they're making it rain or not making it rain or trying to do that. And these are all the public things. Every one of these public documents and public agencies you go to is about weather modification, which is known and proven. And then you say, ergo, therefore, geoengineering. And there's no ergo, there's no therefore. But let me finish. Sir, you've had almost this half show here.
Well, I'm just confused because you said they can't modify the weather, but now you're saying they can.
I didn't say they can't modify the weather.
Go ahead.
I said they cannot change the climate of the planet, period. Next topic.
What do you base that on?
Okay, look. What we're doing here is we are debunking a theory that is impossible, if you will let me.
But give us some facts, Craig. I just want some facts to back up your statement.
I can sit here and do a ton of facts. You want some ton of facts?
Please.
The chemical companies on the earth produce about 5 billion tons of chemicals per year total. Every chemical on the earth is regulated and controlled by the governments on the earth. Okay? Your average aircraft, do you know how many aircraft there are in the world? Jan, you have any idea?
No clue.
Pick a number. Just share it out there.
150,000.
Well, there's a few more than that. There's about 450,000, counting everything. Helicopters, ultralights, because they're all regulated. They all have to have tags. They all have to have permits. Everything is there. The total volume, cubicle, that an aircraft can carry on average when you add them all up and all the register things about 2,000 cubic feet, only which of 10% is available for space. So what you would have to be talking about to have 5 billion tons of the chemicals we know. I mean, that's bleach, that's polyester, that's detergents, that's farm pesticides, that's military grade weapons, that's everything. The math, when you do this, you would require 40 million aircraft to be in the air to disperse to take care of the volume of land versus the volume of atmosphere.
Craig, where are you getting any of these figures? What is it?
They're all right there on Wiki.
What does it have to do with anything is my point. I mean, I don't understand where you're going with this. It has nothing to do with geoengineering. It has nothing to do with the payloads that KC-10s carry, KC-135s, the 20 million tons.
There aren't enough of them to make any impact. That's what I'm trying to say. The volume of the atmosphere is 300 million times the volume of the arable land on the Earth.
So I think your point is, even if they wanted to, they couldn't.
They couldn't. There's no science for it. There's no math for it. They couldn't do this. But the real thing is, Jan, and you asked it in your previous question, and I just have to hit it on here. He talked about these government agencies. Yes, they're all liberal. The Department of Agriculture, absolutely. Look what they're doing with the Farm Bill. 80% of it is welfare. Okay? So obviously they're all in on that together, and that's a real problem that we have. But here's some of the facts we just have to get out there. You have whistleblowers. We have whistleblowers on Benghazi. We have people that have given their life to whistleblow. And you tell me there's no YouTube video, not of a bunch of smoke in the sky, but there's no YouTube video of a guy hooking a hose up to a plane, guaranteeing what the thing is, popping it off, looking at the extra tanks of this, doing the volume measurement. How many airplanes would they take to have? How many chemicals? Where are they getting them from? There's no paper trail at all, Jan. There are more photos of UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Loch Ness Monster.
I don't know where you're going with this, Craig. We have video of KC-10 spraying at altitude. Anybody can look. They can see the nozzles. They can see the spray coming on and off. I mean, we have absolute
They're not what you say they are.
Pardon me?
Those are contrails. They are not chemtrails. There is no spraying. There is no substance for it. There is no volume for it.
Then I challenge people to look themselves, because contrails don't come out of spray nozzles on the back of aircraft, Craig.
Show me a real spray nozzle with a high-resolution camera.
You know what? I challenge people to look for themselves. And again, semantics are very important here. The term chemtrails leads exactly where perhaps Craig has gone. Maybe that's why he has his opinion of conspiracy theory, because that's what you find if you look up the term chemtrails. If you look up the term geoengineering, you'll find hard science.
That's why you've changed it.
Why I changed it?
Like
I never
climate
changed the term.
change.
Look, you admit in one breath, Craig, that they can, in fact, modify the weather.
Yes.
So if they modify the weather 24/7...
No, they're not modifying it 24/7.
How do you know that?
Conjecture you're adding on top of it.
There's weather modification programs going on 24/7 around the globe all year long.
No, there's not.
Oh, really?
There's research going on at universities and people taking taxpayer money for the government.
There's publicized programs going on yearly around the globe, 24 hours a day, all the time. There are published weather mod programs. So on what basis do you make the statement that they're not going on all the time? On what information are you relying, Craig? Because
I'm relying on the simple information that is publicly available that you are intentionally distorting.
I'm distorting it? So, look, I'm only asking people to investigate this, and you don't cite a single source.
I want them to investigate it, too.
Okay, you don't cite a single source, though. You make a statement that they're not modifying the weather constantly, and yet you cite no source.
Hang on, Dane. I have a question here for both of you, particularly Dane to begin with. Let's assume, for the sake of the discussion, that everything that you suspect, everything that you're worried about, is actually going on, and that you have all these political jurisdictions, nameless, faceless, and otherwise.
Well, they're not nameless and faceless, though. I mean, we have DOD, DOE,
okay,
Department of Ag.
Let's just assume all that's true.
It's on the record, though, Jan. It truly is on the record.
Assuming that it's true, what's the worst that can happen? Are you saying that they're doing it and messing up? Or they're doing it and then they're in the process of trying to do something they think is the right thing. They're doing a lot of unintended damage that the rest of us are paying for. What's the worst that can happen if your theory is correct, Dan?
Well, let's ask the people of Oklahoma, how they think the weather is down their way. And, the weather disasters are increasing radically around the globe.
But, Dane, that's been called a tornado belt for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, see, he's talking weather
Hold on,
again,
that was the strongest tornado ever recorded in many aspects. It broke many records. We're seeing weather disasters increasing radically around the globe. There is no science to dispute this fact. We have articles, for example, in Time magazine on the weather. Who profits from this? That's what many people ask too.
So the answer to the question then is they're doing it and they're messing up. Does
anybody disagree that there are more weather disasters around the globe than historical norms? Much more. I don't think you can find anything credible.
Well, I will totally disagree with that, because we don't have any history recorded except for the last couple hundred years.
Craig, but in that couple hundred years, we have a radical increase in weather disasters.
We have a radical increase in record keeping and more information available.
Well, that just doesn't hold water, Craig. You find a single scientific agency that doesn't say weather-related disasters.
You find a single one that isn't profiting from saying the other.
Well, you know, if you look at the law.
Hang on, Dane. I got to take a break. This is our last time out together. This is an interesting conversation. Dane Wigington is on our newsmaker line. He is convinced that geoengineering is real and it's messing us up. Craig Berman thinks that it's not, and there's nothing to worry about. Back in a moment at 1040 WHO. Coming up, we're going to talk with Merrill Matthews about your money. Right now, though, we're talking about the stuff in the sky. Dane Wigington says it's something to be concerned about. His website called geoengineeringwatch.org. I was having a conversation off the air just a second ago with Craig Berman, Dane, and we were discussing what we think your end game is, and I speculated. All right, you say this stuff is real. They're messing up. They're screwing up, and the end game is knock it off. Don't do that. It's pretty simple. If it hurts when it does that, don't do that anymore. And Craig disagreed with me. He said, you haven't heard him say not to do it. What is your goal?
Well, you know, if there's some confusion about that, that is and always has been my only goal. Anybody who reads anything I have ever written, ever posted on our site, that is absolutely the only goal. Nobody should play God with the weather.
Including weather, cloud seeding, or...
Yeah, there he goes again, weather.
Nobody, weather or climate. Nobody should play God with either one. When you make it rain in one place, you obviously take the rain from somewhere else. Craig talks about how wet it is there, therefore none of this could be going on. It's damn dry out here, Craig. It's record dry all across the West.
Well, I have a practical solution for that. Let's stick a straw in the Mississippi River and put the water out in Oklahoma and Texas and Colorado where they need it. We should have done that 50 years ago. But
Craig,
it's nothing to do with spraying in the sky.
You can't change the lack of rain. The forests are dying everywhere in the West. And look, this is all I want. This is all I want, for people to legitimately investigate geoengineering. It's hard science. Again, and those making money off this, I'm reading off Time magazine right now, how Wall Street profits from weird weather. I'm quoting, when Mother Nature is controlled, brokerages, it creates, quote, big profits for banks, brokerages, and insurance firms. This is about money. It's about control. If you're part of Agenda 21, you should know that too, Craig. But I just want people to investigate, Jan. Geoengineering.
Real quick question, in fact, just a theoretical question. Now, you said you're having a terrible drought where you are, and obviously you are.
Horrific.
If you could use a weather modification to steer water your way, you'd say you would forego that? You wouldn't do it?
No, because as soon as you mess with the system, we already see the results of trying to do what they're doing. If people read the document I sent to you, Jan, 80 pages long, that is their stated goal, to control the weather, take rain.
But that was 60 years ago, Dane.
Well, hey, there's documentation as of January 2nd of this year.
Okay.
Global governance on geoengineering. I'm not saying that's the only document. I'm saying that's how far back it goes. We have congressional documents, 40 pages long, which I will mail to you after the show, outlining global geoengineering governance as of right now, 2013.
Hang on. Let's take a call from Greg. Good morning, Greg. What do you think?
Well, Jen, I need a scorecard for both of them. To know what they're for and against. I believe the guy on the newsmaker line makes the most sense. I would like to address Craig.
Real fast.
Okay. Point. I am a conservative, and I believe in the gentleman that's calling in on the line because I've actually seen contrails come on and come off, and I live in West Des Moines. You've called people who believe in that flaming liberals and etc. I'm a conservative, sir, and I'm not a wingnut, nor am I unintelligent. And I don't know what your credentials are, but in regards to Agenda 21, if you believe in that, you know, why don't you move over to
I apologize if you got the idea that he's in favor of it. His movie on documentary on Agenda 21 is expressly a critique of it. Thank you, Greg. Dane, thank you so much. It's always frustrating when the time evaporates so quickly, but I'll just send people to geoengineeringwatch.org.
That's all I hope.
All right.
That's all I want.
Thank you so
Jan.
much. And Craig Behrman, thank you for your spirited conversation as well, sir.
You're welcome, Jan.
Coming up shortly, we're going to talk with Dr. Merrill Matthews. He's an Iowan back in town. He's going to talk about a bunch of stuff right here on the radio.
Views expressed are those of hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
Dr. Merrill Matthews should be joining us shortly. He just got off a plane, and he should be, he's on his way. He'll be here in the next few minutes. We're going to chat with him about your money and Obamacare and how much it's going to cost. He's also done some writing on our national security issue, our energy policy. We're going to talk to him about that as well. And since he's in Iowa, and we got to know him over the years, he's also an expert on the medical savings account issue, the medical IRAs. Later this morning, we're going to talk with former U.S. Senator Blanche Lincoln. She is now the chairwoman for the coalition that deals with business issues, mainly for independent contractors. And she says that independent contractors are experiencing some stress, partly because of the tax code, partly because maybe Obamacare as well. We'll find out about that too. I posted something earlier this morning on my Facebook that's gotten a lot of response too, because I just happened across this. This is almost by mistake I saw this. But down in South Carolina, a lot of different schools now at graduations and valedictorian addresses and some of the baccalaureate things, they're told, especially in the public schools, they're told that you can say anything you want as long as you don't mention God or bring up anything. And heavens to Betsy, you'd never actually have a prayer at a public high school graduation ceremony. So in Pickens County School District in South Carolina, the Liberty High School there nominated Roy Costner, the fourth Liberty High School. And now, in order to keep from bad things like the unauthorized mentions of God in prayer from occurring at a high school valedictorian address, they always are required now to submit their speeches in writing to have them approved of the school hierarchy. And in this case, they did that too. And then Roy Costner stepped forward. This is not particularly a great recording, but you'll be able to make out this fella ripping up his speech and goes off script in a very interesting way.
All in all, those experiences, the people who mentored us, those that we look up to, they have helped carve and mold us into the young adults that we are today. I'm so thankful that both my parents led me to the Lord at a young age. And I think most of you will understand when I say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. As we forgive those who trespass against us, lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. So I was told that I was to speak about the past.
What we'll have here is kind of interesting. That's a really interesting piece of sound there. And immediately after he got done with the valedictorian address, The school administration was asked, hey, are you going to punish that kid for violating the policies or breaking out in prayer in a valedictorian address? They said, well, the administration, no, we're not going to punish him for expressing his religious faith. He's a graduate now, and there's nothing we can do about it, even if we wanted to. And after that, they asked, hey, the village atheist, they asked, hey, what did you think about that? Oh, he's a religious bully for doing the Lord's Prayer at the high school graduation. So if one person gets his will, that's the status quo. If 99% get their way, that's bullying. So isn't that interesting? Merrill Matthews, are you going to need some medical attention here? I mean, because it looks like you're out of breath, and you could stroke out at any second now, buddy.
It could, but we did make it. It's always fun flying on American.
Were you in the front of the bus or the back of the bus?
The middle of the bus.
Okay. So it takes a while to get off, too, doesn't it? And you made your way, and thank you for coming. You're in Iowa, aren't you? You at least had some Iowa connections, don't you?
We do, yes. My in-laws live in Pella, and Julie Jansen owns the Jansen store there in Pella. So we're up here to see my in-laws' 60th anniversary. So it's kind of a good time for us.
Okay. Well, you are a person you do a lot of writing and researching. Who do you work for now? What is your hookup now?
Same place I've been for a little while. Institute for Policy Innovation. That's a 501c3, not a C4, let me mind. That's a 501c3 think tank based in Dallas.
What's the difference between the 3 and the 4?
Apparently the president is going after the C4s a whole lot more than the C3s.
Okay, because what is the actual purpose and difference in the tax code?
In the tax code, a C3 is a nonprofit. It has to be an educational organization, cannot lobby for or against legislation or candidates, so it is and contributions to a C3 are tax deductible.
Okay.
C4 is the one that have gotten into the news a lot lately. Contributions to those are not tax deductible. So even though it's a non-profit organization, they don't make profits and they don't pay taxes on the money that comes in.
What's the fight about then?
That's actually been.
I don't get any of that.
I've raised that exact question. Contributions to a C4 are not tax deductible. So the reason you have.
No, I thought they were being denied their tax status.
They're being denied a tax status, but that means it as a non-profit organization. But if I make a contribution to a C4, it is not tax deductible.
Then what's the advantage of being an O4?
There's not much except the money that comes in is not considered profits that you pay taxes on.
That the organization would pay.
That the organization would pay. But of course, if the C4 hires somebody and pays somebody a salary, that's income, and the person has to pay taxes
just
on
like
that
any
income.
other organization.
Just like any other organization.
But the O4 can lobby in the political sphere.
They consider social welfare organizations. They can do some lobbying as long as their primary purpose is not lobbying, and most of the groups that are C4s actually do a lot of education. It may be about the Constitution, it may be about economic policy or other things. So I've actually been a little surprised because I think most of the people who raise the questions on this simply don't understand that contributions to C4s are not tax deductible.
Well, more than that, I mean, it's as if the denial is denying them their political right to speak and to organize, and that put the Tea Party out of existence. A whole bunch of stuff is being served up as the damage, or some of the pro-life organizations or the pro-family organizations. What were the practical effects of being denied that status? Pretty negligible the way you're describing it.
Oh, absolutely. And the reason some people have raised the question, well, why did you even try to create the organization? And the answer is, if you're going to set up a bank account, if you're doing a bake sale or somebody's giving you money we're going to meet once a month at a church, but it's going to cost us $50 or something like that, and they're going to give you some money to do that. If you have to set up a bank account, it's either got to be under your personal account. If you're going to set it up under the Constitution meeting every week, the bank is going to want to have a tax ID for you. So you've either got to, that's why the C4 is actually pretty effective for these groups because they can set up things, take money, donations or things of that nature. And
it's a management device.
It's a management device.
More than it is a revenue device.
That's right.
Ah, okay. So the 03, like your organization, if people contribute to that, is a tax thing, but you a tax write-off deduction.
It is.
But you guys can't take your clout and go sharpen your elbows at a political event.
That's right. We can't support or oppose specific candidates or specific legislation. Now, as an educational organization, we can say this particular piece of legislation would increase the economic growth, or it would hurt taxes, or it'd be bad for the economy.
Well, you're here today. One of the things we're going to talk about is your skepticism and outright hostility to Obamacare.
Absolutely.
Well, isn't that lobbying against a piece of legislation?
It is not. It is educational because we're talking about the pros and cons of legislation that is out there and has passed.
Ah, okay. So it's public policy now.
It is public policy.
If before it had passed, could you have said anything about it?
No. You can work as an educational group. You can say this legislation is going to raise your health insurance premiums. Here's why. It's going to be harder to get care. Here's why. It's going to have an impact upon doctors or your access to coverage. Here's why. But you couldn't say vote for the legislation or vote against the legislation.
That's a pretty big window of opportunity.
It is a fairly big window of opportunity, but most of the C3s try to stay in line on that because they don't want to lose that tax exempt status.
But the controversy in the recent IRS thing is nothing to do with the 03s. It's the 04s.
It's almost entirely with C4s.
Is this much to do about almost nothing?
It is. Well, from the C4 standpoint and what the IRS is doing, it is a big deal.
The fact that they were targeting the
that's right.
That is a big deal.
That is harassment because they've tried to point out that this is a tax exempt organization, but they're just the C4 is just, as you say, a management tool to be able to make the system work. It's not a tax-free.
Dr. Matthews, before we continue this conversation at all, I think it behooves me to ask you when you prayed last. I'd like to know what the content of that prayer was, sir. Otherwise, we're going to have to deny you access to this program.
And we're also finding out that
you're ducking my question.
I am ducking your question, but I did pray last night.
You would get here on time. Prayer not answered.
And prayer not answered.
God doesn't like you.
But I also prayed I got here safe, and I did get back.
Oh, okay.
So
you're on average, you're okay. Dr. Merrill Matthews is here. We're gonna probably have to get serious when we get back. And we'll take a short time out at 284-1040 or 800-469-4295. Dr. Merrill Matthews is our in-studio guest. One of the reasons why I always enjoy speaking with him is because you were one of the earliest people who developed expertise in medical savings accounts, medical IRAs, which I'm figuring you still have an affection for.
Mm-hmm.
But doesn't Obamacare make them much more difficult or maybe even impossible to maintain?
It's a very good question because for some time we were afraid that the legislation doesn't outlaw what they call health savings accounts now. It doesn't outlaw them. But we were afraid that the various limits that they had in there would essentially preclude them from being able to be used. In fact, I just found out and wrote a piece in Forbes about this about a month or 5 weeks ago. We know what the limits on the HSAs are. We know what Obamacare is going to be, and they slip under the wire. So under the bronze plan, that's the one that's the least comprehensive with the highest deductible and so forth. The HSA fits under there, and I think they may fit under some of the silver plans as well.
Well, is this another case that we have to pass it to find out what's in it, or is the bureaucracy writing the rules or to all these things after the bill was passed, or was this included in the actual structure of the language of the bill itself?
No, we had to wait to find out once the bureaucrats were writing the rules. For the last 3 years, we've been asking the question whether or not these would qualify.
Why do they get to write the rules for this? Is that part of the actual bill itself? We turn was it HHS? We turn them loose. They're the ones that decide the qualifications for existing private sector health plans?
They were going to be, the legislation grants the Secretary of Health and Human Services tremendous powers. If I remember right, in the legislation, the word secretary is mentioned like 3,000 times, and almost all of it is talking to the Secretary of Health and Human Services with phrases like the Secretary is empowered, the Secretary shall decide, the Secretary shall determine what is going to be appropriate, and so forth and so on. And so,
how is that constitutional, by the way?
One could ask the question whether any of the legislation is constitutional.
And they did, and it went all the way to the court.
It went all to the Supreme Court.
And then Robert says it's not.
Robert had a bad night.
He's had a bad, when he said, we admit it's not really under the Commerce Clause. It's under the taxing authority.
It's under the taxing authority.
And that's a stretch, too.
Jaws dropped across the room, but the liberals who were pushing it said, we'll take it. We don't care how you get there as long as you get there. But yes, it empowers her to do a lot of things. And that's why one of the things that's happening right now is she is shifting money around from various elements in the Department of Health and Human Services because Republicans are not allowing them to fund certain aspects, including the IRS agents. They want 2,000 new IRS agents, and Republicans are not providing that money. So they're shifting money around because she has so much power. She has a lot of power to determine what insurers can do, what individuals can do.
She's borrowing money from other sources in order to pay for the IRS agents that the Congress explicitly rejected.
That's right.
Whoa.
In fact, what's happening right now, they included in the legislation a $15 billion what we call slush fund. They called it a prevention and wellness fund. But it was clear the money was in there to be able to use for various things that pork barrel projects and so forth, where they're now wanting to pull that money. Republicans have got legislation to tie up about $4 billion of that, and they've introduced one part of it. They had some problem with some of the conservatives. They've changed that. They're going to introduce another version of that, and conservatives seem to be supportive of it, to try to make sure that people with pre-existing conditions right now are able to get coverage. The legislation created a provision in there so that people with pre-existing conditions can get coverage. 35 states already had provisions that allowed that.
Are we talking about from the private sector, or are we talking about from Medicaid, Medicare?
It's actually from the private sector.
All right.
Not Medicare and Medicaid.
This is a mandate, then?
This is a mandate.
All right.
Before the law goes into effect in 2014, at that point, no insurer can reject somebody, but up until 2014 they could. So they put $5 billion into a fund, and they said, we want to create this program to make sure that people who are uninsurable have access to coverage. Well, they didn't get nearly the number of people that they thought they'd get, and they ended up spending the money a lot faster. And so as of March, they closed that pool.
When you say that they didn't get as many people, does that mean the states were not joining it? Is at the level?
No, that means uninsurable people were not joining it at the level. They anticipated about 350,000 people joining the pool.
Well, is that because the uninsurable people from the private sector were just going across the street into the emergency rooms, and they weren't actually, hey, why should I buy something I can already get down the street for nothing?
No, Jan, one of the dirty little secrets about this is most states had provisions for uninsurable, even though the legislation was sold on the notion we've got people who are uninsurable, they can't get coverage.
So they fixed a problem that didn't exist.
They largely fixed one that didn't exist. I won't say it didn't exist, but there were solutions out there if people wanted them.
Okay, at the state level.
At the state level.
The other thing is all these risk pools, and Iowa dragged its heels for a couple of years on this. Newly reelected Governor Branstad said, I don't want anything to do with this stuff. And then
I think you're talking about the exchanges.
Yes.
And the exchanges are the pools that regular people are supposed to be going in, primarily small businesses and individuals and so forth. And so the states could create it, or if the states didn't, the federal government would create it. And most of the states, I think about 31 states, have said we're not creating the state-based exchanges that's supposed to work like a marketplace.
Because the feds will kick in for the first 3 years, and then after that, we're not sure. The governor said we don't want to join or commit ourselves to expenditures or program and to become dependent upon the federal money, only to have the rug pulled out from under us 3 years from now. We want to make sure that if we're going to establish this system, that we're not going to be left high and dry when the federal system collapses.
And that's actually the Medicaid provision for the poor.
Right.
So states had choices. They could do a Medicaid expansion, and they also have the exchanges. And exchanges is basically the private health insurance market. Medicaid is for the low-income people. So about 20 of the states, I think, right now have said they're not going to take the Medicaid expansion. That's something the Supreme Court said they could do. And so a number of the states have said we're just not going to do the Medicaid expansion. And that's what I think Governor Branstad has said. The other thing is...
He changed his mind at the end of the session.
Mm-hmm.
He went along with it.
Yeah, that's what I thought I had seen, is that he had changed his mind on that. And so several states have. Governor Rick Scott in Florida initially said, we don't want to do this. Then he said he did want to do this. And then the state legislature in Florida said, we're not going to allow you to do it.
Right. So if you were the manager of something, would you have gone along with it?
If I was the manager?
Yeah, if you were the czar at a state level, would you have cooperated or say?
I think they're going to find an awful lot of problems in both the Medicaid expansion and in the exchanges. Now, one of the problems that's going to emerge right now is if a state doesn't set up the exchange, the federal government under the law is required to do it. So you get an exchange whether you want one or not. But the problem is that about 26 million Americans are supposed to get subsidies, federal subsidies under the exchange to help them buy health insurance. The problem is, under the law, you only get the subsidy if the state creates the exchange. Most of the states are not creating the exchange, and if the subsidy, if you go into the exchange and you don't get the subsidy, this is going to be very expensive insurance. You're not going to have to get the insurance. So you could end up seeing, we don't know how this is going to play out yet, but you could end up seeing 30 states that ultimately undermine the whole Obamacare legislation simply because they didn't do a state exchange. They can't get federal subsidies in, and people can't get the subsidy to buy the insurance.
You wrote a think piece on this, and you said the cheapest Obamacare plan will be $20,000 per family. What did you mean by what part of this? From the private sector, the private exchanges, or the private system, or
initial estimates in January of this year from the IRS was they anticipated that basically the basic family policy was going to be about $20,000 a year
by family. That's a man, a woman, and a couple kids.
Yeah,
okay.
Essentially.
All right, so. That sounds like it's a little more expensive than it used to be.
I had a piece in the Wall Street Journal in January that said some people will find their health insurance premiums essentially doubling, and I expect Iowa to be one of those.
Why?
Iowa had done a very good job of making sure people had access to affordable health insurance. You were one of the best states in the country on ensuring people had access to affordable health insurance. Other states, Massachusetts, New Jersey, New York, they had largely destroyed their health insurance market 15 years ago. And so premiums are already really, really high there because of what they did. So people there, when they go on Obamacare, their premiums may go up a little bit, but they probably won't go up much. Iowa and several other states will see their premiums go up significantly under the legislation, especially for individuals who go out and buy their own policies.
Starting,
the exchanges are supposed to start in October. You're supposed to have the Obamacare qualified coverage by January of next year.
Is there a way to avoid that?
We're not entirely sure everything is going to be up and running in time, and I think, I may be wrong, but I think that some Democrats, seeing the fact that's happening with the IRS right now,
because we were promised it's supposed to reduce our medical costs.
Oh yes, you were promised it would reduce premiums by $2,500 for a family by the end of his first term. At the end of his first term, the surveys came out, and premiums had actually gone up by $3,000.
During the time this was debated, none of the people who had actually even come close to studying the actuarial math of all of this stuff said no, you cannot add this many new people to a system and say costs are going down.
It's absolutely right, Jim.
And they also said, and they knew it. They knew they were lying to us when they said this, because there were a handful of people. If I went in my sound files here, I could find 2 or 3 examples of political people within the Democratic Party and within the Obama administration administration said that this is truly not a healthcare medical reform. This is income redistribution. That's what they called it.
That's exactly what. That's right. And you don't have to be brilliant on this. Uninsured people spend about 40% of what insured people spend on health care nationwide. So if you take 32 million people, the estimated new people with health insurance, they're going to more than double their spending. In fact, when people have been uninsured for a while, they spend a whole lot more for the first year or two, and then it sort of drops
because
down.
It's making up for all the lost time. I'm going to get that fixed. Oh, yeah, I'm going to address
exactly
that problem.
What happened.
Okay, all right.
So you're not going to put 32 million more people in there, have them double their spending on health care, and then expect to spend less as a country.
But you can get elected office, though, promising access to other people's money.
Yes, you can.
And he's done that twice. And I'm thinking also that the next politician that runs to take his place will do exactly the same thing.
And the interesting,
and they'll get away with it, likely.
They may, though the public may have had its fill by the time we get through.
Will it make any difference if the public, because there are more of them, that is, people who are getting access to other people's money now, than are people who are voting who are paying?
Well, you may have seen that the independents are beginning to turn on the president now. The more recent polls are showing independents are beginning to be a little bit fed up. They think that a lot of things that are happening in the Congress, both with the IRS, the media scandal, and then Benghazi, are having an impact on them, and they're beginning to turn from the administration side.
Well, the practical question I'd have is, do we have to choose one disaster over another? Because you have been working for a long time and trying to prevent both extremes.
Right.
And is there, when we come back here in a moment, Dr. Merrill Matthews, I'd like you to see, what can we do if Obamacare is not sustainable and it's going to crash under its own weight, as some of the other people have suggested it will, and if the private sector is only interested in one thing, and that is just doing its own thing with the people who can afford it, and you still have people in need. How do we take care of or provide for the genuine people who are in genuine need without destroying everything and screwing it up for everybody? So I'm going to give you that easy task to accomplish right after our farm markets on 1040 WA. Michelson here with Dr. Merrill Matthews, is one of the bright spots in the political think tank arena, because he is able to distill a lot of information. He doesn't get himself trapped between the malarkey the private sector serves up and the malarkey the government class serves up. He's able to evaluate the best and worst of both. So if Obamacare is going to blow up and sink in fall of its own unsustainable dead weight, and the old system that we had really kind of an incestuous relationship between government and the private sector that was becoming too costly too, because the third party financing mentality that both of us were talking about, what would work?
Well, what would work was actually where the system was going before the legislation passed. Jan, the system was moving among employers and individuals to high deductible plans with health savings accounts or health reimbursement arrangements. That was where the system was moving. And it was having an impact on utilization. It was slowing utilization and slowing cost and so forth. That trend is still going on. We don't know to what extent it'll go on after 2014 if the legislation continues, but we were moderating that, and then so you're addressing the issue of healthcare cost growing with those what we call consumer-driven healthcare, where people were given a reason to ask the question, where do I get value for my healthcare dollar?
Yeah, right. Well, how do we get people into the system that, as you say, the people with pre-existing conditions, they didn't step forward and start getting these policies that became available under Obamacare?
As I mentioned, 35 states had what we call high-risk pools.
They were already in something.
So there was something available. These are state-created pools. They gave you a private insurance policy like Blue Cross might manage or something like that, but they were expensive, and so it made perfect sense to say, let's provide some subsidy because these are sick people who are moving into the pool.
Yeah.
They had to pay about half as much as much for their policies. So it made a certain amount of sense to say, let's try to subsidize that a little bit and make sure that's affordable for them. income, and maybe for really low income people, you might provide some kind of subsidy, even though Medicaid is already out there. But you could do 2 or 3 things, and the administration did a little bit of that, but it messed up most of it. But you could have done just a few of those things, and you would have addressed almost all of the problem.
So now that we've had this excursion way to the left, trillions of dollars have been collected. Oh, well, not trillions, billions have been collected already. Usually they front load the benefits for a new social program. In this case, they front loaded the tax collection. I've never seen that before.
And the benefits were put behind because the benefits were going to cost so much. If they were going to try to keep it under $1 trillion, they had to wait 2 or 3 years before they started.
So they had to get a risk pool accumulated before they could start making, before they could push people in it.
Exactly.
Well, what happens to that money if they decided to back away from this?
Well, that's a good question because they have been collecting some money for this, but they've also been spending a fair amount of money.
For its intended purposes, or is it getting lost in the
Well,
papers
we just spent our second Department of Health and Human Services just signed another $10 million contract with a PR firm to help promote Obamacare legislation. You've probably heard that Kathleen Sebelius, the Secretary of HHS, has been talking to health insurers, trying to get them to chip in to the rollout and expansion of the program. That's become something of a mini scandal within itself. So they've got a good pool of money out there that they've been setting aside, and they're using it for various things. But they didn't fund everything, and Republicans have cut on some of those, have stopped some of that funding, and that's making it actually a problem.
Are we going to get it together?
I'd actually be surprised if we get it together. and let me tell you, the worst thing hasn't hit yet. Remember, what happened was they want to make sure that everybody is paying roughly the same premium. They didn't want people who were sick paying a lot more in premiums. What that means...
So they tossed the whole concept of insurance out the
window.
The
actuarial principles were completely cast out in this. So older people and sicker people get to pay less, but that means younger, healthy people end up getting to pay more.
So that's cost shifting there.
That's cost shifting, and they're the ones who are going to see the huge increase in their premiums. Now, I'm an older guy, so I get to benefit from this, but 25-year-olds, they're going to be paying to make sure that I can get more affordable coverage.
Well, who cares? That just means they just buy one less dog or one less station wagon for the suburbs.
Or they just simply don't buy the insurance and pay the penalty, which is what I think you're going to see a lot of.
It's selfish buzzards?
Absolutely.
Bunch of well, we can take their station.
$4,000 or $5,000 for a premium versus the first year's $95 penalty. And then if you get sick, the insurance company has to accept you.
This really is going to have to collapse before we can fix it, isn't it?
It may have to collapse first.
Wow, because the common sense and smarts will not prevail here either, will it?
Well, we'll see. As I was going to mention, because of the IRS scandal, there are some Democrats who might be willing to vote to postpone this thing, giving them a face-saving deal. So they're not saying, I'm eliminating this. We've got an IRS problem. We need to look into this. Let's postpone the legislation since the IRS is going to be your point of contact on Obamacare. You might be able to get some Democrats to postpone it for a little while.
Well, I've been dominating this conversation dealing with health care because I know that's an area of your strong specialty. But when did you start writing about energy policy?
Oh, about 3 years ago. It was becoming a big issue. A lot of the conservative think tanks are not involved in it. And being from Texas, it really is a big issue there. Plus, you could see this was the field, the landscape's changing. We are moving to an era in which in the next few years we could actually be a net exporter of energy because the fracking and the natural gas and the oil production has risen so much here that it's created a new opportunity for us. And the states that have moved into this, Texas, North Dakota, and a few others, those economies are booming.
I noticed that the former Soviets, now the Russians have a huge access to lots and lots of energy. They're a huge exporter of energy as well.
That's right.
That's what's holding up their economy.
It has been for some time. The problem they've had is for the last decade, they've been charging through their national company, Gazprom, they've been charging higher prices to some of the former Soviet bloc countries and so forth for natural gas. But because of the U.S. increasing its production, it has freed up both natural gas and coal so that some of those countries actually have other options, and that has forced Gazprom to actually lower its prices.
So we're in the middle of energy wars then.
We're in a gas war.
We're in a currency war with the world. We're in an energy war with the world. We're fighting. I mean, it would be really difficult to be a president, wouldn't it? I mean, all the junk he has to monitor in his brain and try to sort.
It would be, and it's sort of creating new international strategies. Because of Russia having to cut its price now, Putin's budget had to go down by about 6%, which means he has less money in Russia to use that for mischief, to fund other places and so forth. So there's huge international
So
benefit.
if we sell more energy to some of the former third bloc nations, we can drive down his ability to create international mischief.
Absolutely.
So
as with Venezuela and Iran.
Ooh. So hey, let the dig baby drill baby drill then, eh?
We only get and just think about Iran. Iran controls that Strait of Hormuz. Only about 12 million barrels of oil come through for the U.S. out of that. We get a fairly small percentage of that.
Right.
But we've threatened to keep that thing open. At some point, if we're a net energy exporter and we can take care of other countries, and Iran says we're going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, we might say, fine, shut it down.
Can we mess this up?
I'm sure we can. I'm almost sure we will.
Dr. Merrill Matthews is here. A brief time out. Back in a moment at 1040 WHO. In the case of Dr. Merrill Matthews here, a lot of the good stuff happens when we're between breaks here. And we started talking about the previous part of the conversation where the Obamacare legislation said the Secretary of HHS shall, and then write rules, and she shall be there, or that person shall be making the rules and making those determinations. Vast amounts of power given to whoever is in control of that agency. Right now, Sibelius is in the crossfire because of one little girl's quest for a new set of lungs because she has, I think it's cystic fibrosis, and she was not allowed to be on the organ donor list for some reason. The different priorities, and I don't understand any of that. But now we have people going all the way to the top in the bureaucracy making these kinds of life and death decisions. Is that the way we're supposed to be organized?
Well, what Secretary Sebelius said, at least news reports said that she did not have the authority to put the girl on the adult list. Not having the authority to stop this administration on so many things.
Right.
But because of the judge, she's going to has ordered it. She's going to put the girl on the list. But what was problematic?
But why does a judge have the right to tell? I don't understand.
Basically, he's put a stay on the law. Sebelius says the law says under a certain age you can't be on the adult list.
Is that a law or a rule? An administrative rule?
It is. It should be an administrative rule, I suspect.
Okay. All right.
And so he's essentially putting a stay on that. So she can put the child on the list, on the adult list. And then what was happening within the debate is there's a sort of general sense of if you put the child on the adult list, then she can be saved. And she may be able to find a compatible donor, but because this depends upon where you're living, where you are, because the organ transplants are done within certain regions. They start within a region that you're in, and then they look for people who are the most compatible, and they look for people who are in the worst state right then, who could still actively use the organ. So she may be on the list, but a donor may come up who's not compatible, different blood types or other things, and it's just not going to be a good fit for her. So she may not make it just because just being put on the list does not mean she will make it. Other people may be able to make it, and other people, Art Kaplan on Fox News said, well, if you put her on, that means somebody else has to lose their life. No, not necessarily. If she's put on and she is the most likely donor, she's the best donor for this, she'll get it. But if she's not, somebody else will get it.
So is this the hazard you have whenever you have politics and government and bureaucracies involved, these life and death situations?
It is, and when you have socialism, because the only reason that you can give the only benefit you can get from giving an organ is altruism in our country.
Well, what other benefits are there?
Well, some of us have suggested that you ought to be able to at least have certain things be benefited in certain ways, have your funeral cost paid if you're giving as a deceased donor, or maybe even take money for that.
That's interesting because if you sign, I've done this. I've signed donor cards for your. I mean, the thing on my driver's license. I used to drive a motorcycle, so every time I do that, people say thank you. Don't wear your helmet. So, but should you be able to designate? Okay, if I ever am in a position to donate, my wife should be able to auction off my parts for my estate.
On a paired organ like a kidney, I think you should be able to get some compensation for that. I had a piece in a magazine several years ago said, have a heart, but pay me for it.
Dr. Merrill Matthews, thank you for joining us, and I will send people to some of the websites where your articles can be found. I thank you for your expertise, and thank you for coming back to visit us.
Good seeing
always.
You again.
Coming back right after the news, we're going to talk with U.S. Senator Blanche Lincoln, 1040 WHO. There's just so much going on, so much to keep track of. We get a chance to briefly chat with former U.S. Senator Blanche Lincoln, who's now the chair of It's My Business Coalition. Their mission is to protect independent contractors. Senator Lincoln, protect them from what?
Well, good. Hello, Jan. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Good. Well, this is an opportunity really to allow independent contractors and small businesses, family-owned businesses that are independent contractors, an opportunity to come together and, really in a coalition way to raise an awareness about, one, most importantly, the positive impact that they make that's made in this whole country to the U.S. economy and the job market.
Well, why do they need protection? I mean, you formed a whole organization based upon the idea that somehow independent contractors are under some kind of threat. From whom and what's the nature of it?
Well, one of the things that we're finding, particularly for small businesses and independent contractors, is the uncertainty that comes from the volume of rules and regulations that are coming out of Washington, or more importantly, that are just there, with about over 4,200 pending regulations that are out there. And there's some efforts where resources have been in the fiscal budgets in both 2011 and 2014 from the administration, where agencies are kind of coming in and looking through to a joint effort between labor and the IRS for worker misclassification initiatives in targeting employers that they think may be improperly classified workers. Now, it's important that we know that independent businesses, one of the things we want to affirm in this coalition is the fact that they own their own businesses, and a declaration that independent contractors ought to be allowed to make their own decisions within certainly the letter of the law.
Well, here's the deal, Senator Lincoln. A lot of over the last generation or so, a lot of the decade rather, you have all these impending regulations and mandates made on employees, on employers rather, that when you hire a new employee, they're subject to this and this and this benefits and these packages and these assumptions for benefits and insurance, and I think you were one of the original critics for the anticipating Obamacare. I think you were one of those people who resisted efforts even in your own party for the federal expansion in some of these roles.
Right.
To avoid some of the onerous new regs under which the businesses were being asked to operate, they said, okay, we're not going to hire anybody. That is, we're not going to make them employees. We're just going to hire them as independent contractors. Therefore, they're out from a lot of these mandates. Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, not specifically, you know, we know that independent contractors understand that with the decision to work as an independent contractor certainly comes certain responsibilities, paying their fair share of state and federal income taxes and ensuring, you know, health care coverage and other benefits for themselves and for their families. So we're not saying that they should shy away from what those responsibilities are. And there are some threats that, you know, that are out there that are rooted in some legitimate concern.
Well, can you give me something practical?
A rule. I mean, there are laws out there, you know, that we think are very sufficient. But what we're saying is to absolutely come in and for agencies to build their own coalitions to target independent businesses who are really going by the law.
Give me an example. Because I need some. I'm trying to figure out what I should be upset about and how we should help you.
Right. Well, the best way to see some examples are to go to the website. www.itsmybusiness.com.
Right.
And you know what we're encouraging people to do is to go to that website so that they can find out details about federal and state actions that are pending right now that could possibly be threatening their businesses, their business owners, and jeopardizing really their positive economic contribution that they're making. So in terms of specific, you know, if you look at our membership, you'll know that there's people now that are becoming aware as independent contractors and small and family-owned businesses that are realizing that if some of the things that are being proposed go into effect, then they're going to have a very big impact on the number one job creators in this country.
Like what?
So
give me an example. What are they proposing that would have that effect?
I don't have all of the rules and regs before me, particularly on the state levels, and that's really where most of them are. But again, they are on the website where people can go and take a look at that. But you know, the possible restrictions that could be put on them in terms of operating or managing and growing their businesses is something that we are concerned about. And we want to make sure that small and family-owned businesses that are independent contractors are aware of that. That's why I say this is a campaign of awareness. We think it's very important for them to be aware of what the possibilities would be, you know, coming down the pike if some of these regulations were to be put into place.
Okay. Well, we've attracted the attention of a small business owner, and this is Mark. You're concerned about what? Mark?
Am I on?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Well, there's a lot of contractors out there, I'm guessing, in the roofing business, in the lawn care business, and there's people out there working that aren't either licensed or paying federal income tax, state income tax, employer tax, unemployment tax, insurance on their guys. What's the avenue, or what do you do? I mean, I would think you could send a letter out to everybody who does have a business that says, okay, here's the person at IRS that you call when you suspect this. I mean, there's just hundreds and hundreds of these guys out there underbidding us, and we can't compete when we're spending, 25% in taxes.
All right,
Mark is absolutely right, and there's always going to be some people in every industry who choose not to follow the rules, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about folks that are following the rules. So there's no doubt that, as I said, independent contractors, they definitely have certain responsibilities, and they need to know what those responsibilities are, and they need to actually be abiding by those. Whether, as you said, paying their fair share of state and federal income taxes, or health care coverage for those in their business that need to that they are required to pay for. There's no doubt. So that he's absolutely right. We have to make sure that the letter of the law is being adhered to, and for those that aren't, that's a problem. The concern is that in the future, if these new regs, and they're still being promulgated, but those new regs, if they are so restrictive that our independent contractors and small businesses are not going to be able to survive with the kind of business model that is critical to being able to provide flexibility to workers and owners, families, to be able to work through a business model that they think is best for them, I think there's some great concern there. And that's what we're trying to elevate is the awareness of that, and bring people to, and encourage Mark to go to the site, to our website.
All right. Senator Blanche Lincoln, thank you for joining us here today. It's itsmybusiness.com. Itsmybusiness.com for the rights of independent contractors. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jan. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Well, let's. What we'll do is we'll take a brief time out, and we'll come back. We have a little bit of open line time, and you're welcome to join us at 284-1040 or 800-469-4295. Before we do anything else, let's check in with Scott from the Iowa Gold Connection.
Bernie Madoff was recently interviewed from his prison cell where he is serving a 150-year sentence for his multi-billion-dollar Ponzi scheme, and he had some interesting observations for dealing with the markets these days, saying outright that people are gullible and regulators are grossly under-equipped to police the financial markets, and that hedge funds are actually a danger to the market. Which is interesting to me because today, FINRA, which is the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, issued a warning about hedge funds, saying savers are getting themselves into trouble by putting money into products like private real estate investment trusts where investors may be vulnerable to fraud, kind of like what Madoff was talking about. So for those of you who are unwilling to jump into shark-infested waters, you should also know that yesterday, the director of the U.S. Mint stated that the demand for gold and silver bullion right now is unprecedented. Call me. I'll show you how to get yours. 1-800-819-7160 or visit iowagoldconnection.com and request your free information. That's 1-800-819-7160 or visit iowagoldconnection.com.
That was an interesting conversation. I think. I was just trying to figure out, I still don't know exactly what I was supposed to be concerned about. I asked a couple of questions, and that was oh well, never mind. Still don't know what I'm supposed to be concerned about. We're still thinking about, at least I am thinking about the conversation with Dr. Merrill Matthews. And about the last part of that conversation where the girl is looking for a lung replacement because she has cystic fibrosis. That's an amazing story, is it not? I suspect many of you have stories about organ replacement and organ donors and needs for a replacement. You've either wore out or busted some of the ones that you have. Carla, you have a related subject to this. You wanted to ask about blood banks?
I do, and it sounds kind of snarky, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So your hypothetical situation with your wife auctioning off your body parts after your snuff on your motorcycle without a helmet,
right?
That was pretend, but indeed we are seeing people walking or rolling around with I donated 5 gallons of blood,
right?
And stickers on their cars and such,
right?
And they walk away from that with like a cookie or a sandwich or something.
Right.
But on the other end of that blood donation, there are recipients who, on their hospital bills, are being quite handsomely charged for receiving that blood, which was donated.
Right.
So the benevolence of the person is not on the other end of that blood. Granted, there is processing which happens, and you don't want to get Charlie's blood if you are, Charlene. You don't want the wrong blood, but those things are people are already being employed to do those jobs. So
there is an extremely high demand for blood. In fact, blood banks even compete for donors. I don't know about the who buys it and who pays for it and what the actual transmission of it is. It's a huge multi-billion-dollar industry, however. But you're right. In many cases, all that people get out of their donation is a warm fuzzy because they know they've done something that's useful.
And there's something to be said for virtue.
But then some people do get
they
do get paid for it. And I don't know what the going rate is. A lot of theoretically homeless people will donate blood. I think they can do it like twice a month. Was it $15 to $20 a hit?
Those are college students, and those are for platelets or white white cells.
Assuming they're healthy.
Yes. But my point is that along the same thinking as your wife who's auctioning off your kidneys or your heart,
yes.
The people who are donating and giving of themselves, which is a virtue. I don't mean to
around the
that.
world, though, people actually do get paid. There are some places where you can literally sell your kidney and go to the highest bidder, and it's some of those places Americans have gone off to and purchased body parts. You can't do that in the United States legally.
No,
at least not yet.
But my point is that by the time that blood, which was given in a free will offering, is
right.
given, and it goes back into the patient, there's a whole lot of money that changes hands.
Yep.
And I was just wondering, and you're a big fan of Follow the Money, I was just wondering if you had any insight on that.
Well, it depends on if it's in a private sector, if it's a public sector, if it's a hospital, or if it's a Red Cross. There are many different trails that all end up in that same place, and it bears some research, and I think you've inspired me to do that. We were just thinking, hey, thank you, Carla. Ross, you have some expertise because you have a friend who has gone through that lung transplant.
Just had her cystic fibrosis lung transplant earlier this week. Real quickly, my wife used to work at one of these plasma centers.
Right.
So I called her just quickly to get some information. And I love Carla, but it's not just college students who go and do this stuff, especially with unemployment, a lot of people being out of work. People are using this to kind of supplement their income, as weird as that sounds.
Right.
The plasma center over on the east side, you get $40 the first time you would go and donate, $20 to $25 every subsequent time, and you have to wait 2 days between going back. And there are people that...
2 days? I thought it was like 2 weeks.
2 days is what I was just told.
Wow. That some people can regenerate that fast. That's really cool.
I guess
means they're really healthy. So, but the cystic fibrosis thing and the waiting list and all that's a fascinating story. What a heart-rending story that is.
It's heart-wrenching is the absolute the right word for it, Jan. And I feel like I hate that politics are being played with this because they're
on both sides of this.
On both sides of it. And like most things, I think the truth kind of lies in the middle, and you're only going to tick off both sides when you actually try to talk about it, because there's a reason that, and I think the doctor was kind of alluding to it there, Dr. Matthews, there's a reason that a 12-year-old, that's the cutoff limit. Because
for an adult list.
For an adult list.
Because they're just not big enough.
Exactly. The chest cavity's not, there's several issues, but there's a reason that 12 is the cutoff for that.
But I was looking at pictures of this girl while she's in hospital after she's been told that she's now on the list. She's a big kid. If the hospital pictures are accurate, she's a pretty good sized kid.
I don't think that chest cavity is the only reason that there's a qualifier there. I think there are other things that go into that. And the doctor was right also that it doesn't necessarily mean if she gets put on the list that somebody gets taken off the list.
This just gets more crowded, that's all.
Exactly.
It dilutes the effect of being on the list.
That's, I think, a big part of it, too.
Well, so my question would have been, I always thought that cystic fibrosis was an autoimmune disease. The is on the end of that usually means an inflammatory thing and the lungs become less functional. If her body does that to one set of lungs, I'm not sure why it wouldn't do the same thing to a new set of lungs, but that's a question I should ask somebody that knows.
We didn't cover that at DMAC. Sorry.
Yeah, we didn't get that in shop.
Pre-math didn't cover it.
Hey, everybody, thanks for listening. I'll see you tomorrow, friends.